Okay, I'm in Soup Girl Autumn. Doing the first soup of the year, so I'm really excited. You know?
What soup is it?
Okay, so it's the soup that I make that I invented. Okay, and I'm very proud. I'm very proud of this soup because my sister then made it for a friend of hers who's a chef in Portland, and he started making it at his restaurant. So it's banging, but it's like you do, red onion, carrot, celery, peppers. But I do like some bacon at the first, and then I do olive oil and the bacon fat to do the veggin'. Let that get soft. Deglaze with dry vermouth. And then the main spices are paprika, smoked paprika, celery salt. Get in some oregano. Get in some dried parsley. And chicken stock, and then chicken. I usually do like whatever chicken's around, if I have roasted chicken, put that in, whatever chicken as it is. And then I do dumplings on it. So I've got the soup going now, so it's chilling. So it'll be ready in a couple hours, and then I just gotta do the dumplings. And that's a good life, baby.
That sounds like a good ass soup.
That's a good ass soup, man. Oh, sometimes chili flakes in there too. Probably a little bit of MSG because why not? Why not? But recommended soup of the day, bitch.
Soup chat.
I love soup, man. Pro soup. Every culture's got a soup. They all bang. I'm interested in everybody's soup. I'm interested in everybody's dumpling. That's what I'm interested in.
Everybody, yeah.
Everyone's got
I'm
one.
interested. Everybody's sandwich. Everybody's everybody's form of like bread, just like the bread that like people that people make from wherever it is. Because everybody was like, wheat. What if I ground it up and put it with water and other things, and then I put it on, and then I fired it, and then I ate it, and in every
hallelujah
civilization that is like cropped up was like literally the same thing at the beginning. We got to get our own bread.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if they don't know it, everybody's like, we got to do the black bread or the or wheat bread or rye or whatever. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll smash anybody's bread. Absolutely destroy it. I understand that it's probably good for you to not eat too many carbs, but also fuck it. We all gotta die something, and I'm gonna die of pasta and bread.
I'm gonna die carb loading for this.
That's right. I got a carb load before the podcast.
Yeah, we've got to do it. Just exercise. You gotta do that. You gotta do some more exercise.
Yeah. Keeping my energy levels up. It's tough.
Yeah. Oh man, what's been going on? Just soup.
Soup is the main thing today. I had the normal. So I tried to do Halloween. The Halloween's getting bigger here. Right? So Halloween sort of exists now in a way that it certainly didn't when I showed up. And so I live in a block of flats, so you're not really going to get trick-or-treaters, right? Because they'd have to get in the front door, and it's just not going to work. But we've got a bunch of kids in the building, who occasionally make fun of me for watching Castlevania for my job and things like that. And, I'm pally with most of them. So I carved a pumpkin, as my want. And usually how it works in London is that if you're participating in trick-or-treating, you put up decoratings. You carve a pumpkin, you put up whatever. And then people know that they can go to your house, right? So I carved my little jack-o'-lantern, but I was going over to my big titty goth girlfriend, brackets platonic. She's a platonic girlfriend. Eleanor's house to watch scary movies. So I was like, okay, well, your girl went and bought full-size candy bars, all right? Your girl went and got, they're Mars bars here, but they're Milky Ways, right? So I got the full-size. I was all like, I'm just hooking these children up. That's what's up. And then, I put them in the bowl next to the jack-o'-lantern, and I was like, I'm going to be a hero. I'm a fucking hero right now. And off I went to Eleanor's to go get drunk. Came back at midnight. None of the kids had taken a candy bar. So now I've just got all of these Mars bars around the house. And I'm just like, man, you know, and I knew some of them were going trick-or-treating, I think. And like, and then I texted one of my neighbors and was like, yo, I got the candy out for kids or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was like, she hadn't seen it. They were already in bed. And I was like, ah. So anyway, like I have had a Halloween failure. Yeah.
Just take, so last night we took our daughter out and, you know, we did the trick-or-treating. And whenever we do that, we leave we have like a folding table.
Yeah.
And I put like some signs on it that say like, Happy Halloween, please take some candy.
Yeah.
And we just sit it at the end of the driveway and we put like 3 or 4 like just baskets of, you know, just like candy. You just, you know, go buy a bag of it, throw it in there. And so I guess there weren't as many kids out trick-or-treating this year, which stinks, but there did seem to be good participation from the houses, so that was cool. And it was really nice. I love Halloween because you get to hang out with everyone, and yeah, that's really cool. But like at the end of the drive, so last year the candy was all gone by the time we got back.
Yeah.
This year when we got back, there was still some in every one of the bowls, and like my daughter was getting tired. It was already past her bedtime, you know. So my wife was like, I'm just gonna like give as much as these kids want. So she like starts handing out like kids who come by, and she was like, take as much as you want, or take as much as your parents let you have, or whatever. And they were like, really? And they were like freaking out. And so like the kids were like screaming. They were so excited. And she had to go in, and we had one thing of candy left. And I was like, we had one like basket that still had some candy in it. And I was like, there's a big group of trick-or-treaters down there. I'm going to go give this to them. And like, I went down and like, I did it. And like, I was like mobbed by like 18 kids. It was so cool. 'Cause they were like, oh my God, he said we could take as much as we want. Like, it's just like in there, like handfuls. I was like, yeah, as long as your parents don't care, knock yourselves out. Like, and like, it was just so funny because like they were all around me and they were like, this is so cool. Thank you. Like they kept calling me sir, and I was like, oh my God. And like one of them like had gotten so much, he got so excited that like he spilled it on the ground. And so like I had like my flashlight on my phone out, like,
helping to pick,
because they were like starburst on the ground, and they were like, "I gave this for you." Anyway, it was really cool. You know, it was nice. So my suggestion for you would be to just hang on to those Mars bars, and you know, just be like, "Hey, neighbor kids, you were asleep." But hey, good news. It's All Saints Day candy. Or,
yeah, that's 100% what's going to happen. Yeah, like
and palm that off on someone else, like I did, because I was like, we have way too much candy. We don't need it.
Yeah. Like I'm trying to make it somebody else's problem because, like, don't get me wrong, I could like eat a Mars bar, but like, how am I getting through this many? No. Like, yeah, it's just not gonna happen. So I'm old, you know. My idea of like a treat is cheese.
Yeah, I don't have the sweet tooth I once had anymore either. It's I don't like a lot of things, but I do enjoy Halloween candy. Because you know, it's just a treat.
Oh,
just
a
nice
treat.
little treat. Yep. All right, you ready to do this?
Do it.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke Waters, and I'm an amateurish historian. And as always, I'm joined by Dr. Arthuriana, who is anything but. Today, we're talking more about Arthur.
Woo.
Arthur.
Arthur.
Yeah. Arthur.
Arthur.
Yeah, but before we get there, we got a question, as always, from one of our patrons. This comes from Jai, or Jay. It says who says, a bit of a more lighthearted one, but is there a food or beverage that should return with a V? I believe Eleanor has mentioned sweet lasagna, and pizza, quote unquote, was very different before tomatoes were a thing in the world. Are there any medieval versions that are actually better? Eleanor, please.
Yeah, beer and ale.
Get it.
They
Get it.
Dude, they whip. Like the one that I got to have the other year was so good. The one where it was literally like they went and harvested the stuff that you put in the Groot, it's called. So like you just go around and you're like, oh, hey, what herbs are here? You know, what flowers we got going on. And then you put that in. That is so good. Oh, man. Like, incredibly good. And, you know, part of it is, of course, the fact that they don't have all the stabilizing agents or whatever and preservatives. So that's why they can't make it. But, oh, man, it's so good. Another thing I think is cool that medieval people are doing all the time, I'm very serious about this, is they're just doing weird shit with almond milk. I don't
Disgusting.
know. Like,
awful.
They are using almond milk constantly. There is so much almond milk around the shop.
Really?
Yeah. Oh,
that
God.
is crazy to me. Interesting.
Yeah, and so
not because I don't know why. It just like I know nowadays it's so water intensive.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I just wouldn't have thought that they would have.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
that
definitely different. In
Yeah.
terms, and like obviously they don't have industrial farming or whatever, but you would be shocked by how much almond milk they use, and sometimes they just sound like they're making things that like I just never even thought about that before. So I'm like, I don't know, how about that?
Did they use it as like a sweetening agent, or was it
No,
like a replacement for actual milk?
It's
or?
like a replacement oftentimes for things if you need a lot of egg or if you need a lot of like stuff like that. So they'll do something with almond milk instead.
Okay.
I think that's quite interesting. And then the other thing that I think we should bring back is potage, which is kind of like you got a sort of like house soup that's going all the time. Then you're just like constantly feeding it, and then someone comes in and you go, potage?
And you go, would you like some soup? And they're like, oh my God,
yes. Obviously. And I
Can
think,
you imagine how much more often you would go to your neighbor's house if every time you went in, they were like, here's some vegetable soup, here's some chili, here's some Italian wedding soup. And you're just like, fuck, thanks, man. This is great.
I'd be visiting. Homie,
Yeah.
I would be visiting. And I think it's a cool idea just have something that's like constantly cooking on a really low heat all the time.
Yeah.
That you can just like dip in and out of. I think that's great and brilliant. And I think we should bring it back. You know?
Indeed.
Return to the pottage.
Yeah. To the, pottage.
Pottage. I don't know. I don't fucking know.
Yeah, I don't have any idea. I don't have anything for this because I don't, any specific thing. I don't really have an answer because I guess probably to go back to things that weren't made with so much fake shit. It's going to give us cancer. That'd be cool.
That'd be cool.
Any of that, whatever that would be. But yeah. Jai, thank you so much for the question. If you would like to ask us questions like these, you know the deal. Please sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/WNSDpod.
That's right.
You get all the regular episodes ad free. I think this is actually the 140th episode or 139th, something like that.
Dear Lord, okay.
Regular episode, And you get all the bonus episodes. We did the first part of our Castlevania Nocturne review last time. And next time will be the 50th bonus episode, and we'll finish up Castlevania Nocturne. So if you like that, kind of stuff, then sign up. You get access to Patreon, ask us questions, all that sort of shit. It's great. Yeah, patreon.com/WNSDpod, $5 a month, etc., etc. And real quick before we move on, last week we were talking. We had a question, and it was about whether peasants were actually sewn into their clothes. And me and Eleanor were discussing where this like myth kind of cropped up from, and I said, maybe it was from something from George R. R. Martin. Maybe that was where a more recent vintage of it cropped up. But so I wanted to check, and I DM'd my friend Manu and Emmett, and they run the Nauticast podcast. which goes through a Song of Ice and Fire chapters one at a time.
Yeah.
And it's a really good show. You should check it out. But yeah, they looked into it because there's like a website where you can search for just like words in all the Song of Ice and Fire novels.
Yeah.
And apparently being sewn into stuff only comes up once. And it's about a dead Lord Serwyn. And yeah, that was it. So I doubt that was the
I doubt
that was where it came from.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to shout out Manu and Emmett. Thanks for the info, and yeah, call myself out. I knew I shouldn't have disparaged George Martin. That was my fault.
We gotta have self-crit. I will say too, I had someone contact me online and say apparently Archduke Franz Ferdinand, R.I.P., rest in piss, you fucking noble bitch. Apparently he used to be sewed into his clothing, I was told.
Holy shit.
Because he just thought it gave him a better line, and apparently it contributed to his death because they couldn't get it off because they had to like cut him out. So,
man. Oh, that is oh man.
I mean, maybe that's a myth or something, but someone online told it to me, and I'm just saying it now because I think it's funny.
That's great.
Yeah, there you go.
Great, I love it. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah. Sign up for Patreon. Give us questions, things like this. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, on to the main show. I'm sometimes not so good with the segues.
Yeah, that's fine.
As we've seen so far, the early Arthurian legend was fragmented and disconnected from itself, with little in the way of a cohesive narrative or even setting. Arthur and his buddies would show up randomly at times or places in their lives or throughout history, do something like take on a daring quest or talk to a doorman, and then disappear into the ether again. It was essentially canon building via guerrilla warfare. Where are the stories coming from? Are they over that ridge? Is Arthur there? Who's he hanging out with? Oh fuck, it's some random Welsh hero hanging out with Arthur in the trees. You get the idea. It was chaotic, and the stories didn't really try to build directly on one another too much. But that all changed when a Welsh cleric named Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote the Historia Regum Britanniae in 1136, which was our topic last week. Old Jeff assembled all the aspects of Arthuriana he liked, took inspiration from 24 other sources, and jammed it all together to form an actual canon. There's a narrative. We see the birth and death of our fabled hero Arthur, who does some suitably heroic stuff in between. Hell, we've even got Merlin and Cucking and Mordred and even the Isle of Babylon. But even so, it still seems weird or off-kilter to us today. There's no Camelot, no mention of any Knights of the Round Table. Even the ones who predate Historia's publication are absent. And for what is considered the foundational piece of Arthuriana, there's surprisingly little Arthur in it. Our hero only appears in 2 of the 12 parts, and it seems much more like a mythical history of Britain and its peoples, with a couple of short vignettes about this Arthur guy later on. And while that is a somewhat accurate assessment of Historia, it also leaves out the fact that Arthur is prophesied, his birth foretold and allowed for by magic and sorcery, and his portrayal as the true king who serves both his people and Christ. So while Geoffrey of Monmouth doesn't exactly create the Arthurian canon that we know today, his work did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of providing narrative structure, early tropes, and greater expansion of the Arthurian world. Essentially, it allowed the many, many writers who would create it allowed the many, many writers who would create Arthurian stories afterwards to sing from the same hymnal, as it were. Geoffrey created the fundamental aspects in Historia Regum Britanniae. It was up to the dozens and dozens of writers who came later to flesh the whole thing out in the ways we know today. So yeah, today we're talking about the post-Galfridian era of Arthurian legend following the publication of Historia from about 1137 to the early 1200s. We're going to try and end our series on Arthuriana today, but there's just way too many important post-Galfridian stories to discuss, so we're breaking it up. Next time we'll do the Vulgate and post-Vulgate cycles before finishing up with the Mort d'Arthur. But today we have 4 French poems and 3 Welsh romances to discuss, so let's fucking go.
Woo!
Eleanor, before we move into the stories, what are the big themes and ideas that start to get introduced into the Arthurian legend in the post-Galfridian era? What becomes the prevailing narrative at this time?
Cucking. And by that, of course, I mean romance.
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 Totally.
I mean, it's like, okay, so like it's not all cooking, but there is some cooking. And what happens here is you start to get narratives. So if before you have just kind of like a series of wacky adventures, and then you have Geoffrey being like, oh, hey, look, here's the history. What these do is they're like, here's a story about a knight, and there's usually a lady involved. So people start showing up like Lancelot, and like the names that you would expect to have heard from, which you hadn't had before. So it's at this point in time that you start to get what probably when you think of an Arthurian legend in your head, that's what you're thinking about. So these are the romances pretty much.
Yeah. So we're going to start with 4 French poems by Chretien de Troyes. These are written between the 1170s to the 1190s. And these poems greatly expand upon the Galfridian themes and use the setting as a backdrop to begin adding to the ensemble Arthurian cast, specifically the Knights of the Round Table and their various quests. Now, the 3 Welsh romances we will talk about later and de Troyes' French poems seem to be based on one another, though we can't know for sure which one was actually written first and thus who deserves credit, or alternatively, if both were in fact based on an earlier work that has since become lost to us. So Eleanor, let's start with the first one by de Troyes, and that is Erec and Enide.
So this is his first one, and it is quite exciting. Because we get finally there's some good fucking romance around here, and I think that it's good and I enjoy it. So finally we're getting into the good stuff, right? So we start off with I also like Erec and Enide because I think it's very funny to be like lol Erec, but anyway, so you start off at Arthur's court, everyone's celebrating Easter. And they're like, well, we're going to have a big hunt for a white stag. And whoever catches the white stag gets to kiss the loveliest lady at the court, which probably means like your girlfriend or whatever. So Erec, the hero, doesn't have an ami or, like a lady love. And so he kind of like sits around kicking rocks and looking sad or whatever. And so basically kind of like trying to get out of the exercise. So he kind of takes off by himself and he runs into Guinevere and he says, okay, well, I will come with you on the hunt. But they lose their way in the woods. And then they come upon a bad band of strangers. Okay. So there's a knight. There's his girlfriend who's very haughty. And then and a dwarf with a whip. ? There's a lot of dwarves. Okay. Get ready for all the dwarves. And they insult Guinevere and like the rest of the party. So Erec is like, I'm going to kick your ass. That's off after the night to like avenge the insult to Guinevere. So like it's just flagging some things up here. Like white stags and white animals in general are usually kind of seen as like guides to the other world. A lot of the time they lead heroes on like supernatural encounters. And sometimes to like, they'll take you to a fairy mistress who's very beautiful. Okay. Dwarves, meanwhile, are usually portents of supernatural evil, which seems gross, but there it is. But so you're expecting like this big kind of lead up to like, oh, something magic is about to happen. But Erec goes into like a very real town. And they're just like, oh, here's like some normal medieval shit going down. So that people are like sweeping out rooms and they're brushing their horses and they're playing chess and like whatever else. So Erec then comes upon a vavasor, which is kind of like a very minor nobleman. Vavasor kind of stands for vassal's vassal. And his hot daughter. And so these guys are down on their luck. They're broke. And the hot daughter is performing very humble tasks around the house and stable. And she's wearing a white dress, like the white white stag, lol, white shag. But it's like super shabby and her elbows are sticking through. And so Erec, he got out of the stag hunt or whatever, but he kind of like gets involved in like some weird rituals because he's like, well, I will be the champion for your daughter, broke-ass Vavasor, with the knight that I am trying to hunt down to get in a fight with because he insulted Guinevere. And he's like, I will also marry her and take you like back to court with me. And they're supposed to have this big joust, him and the knight who insulted Guinevere, and the price of the joust is a sparrowhawk. That will be given to whatever lady the winner is, because girls love sparrowhawks.
Yep.
Anyway, Erec wins the joust, surprise, and off like goes the other knight, and he goes back to Arthur's court. And he's like, by the way, though, I'm going to marry this girl. And like he celebrates with her and the family and goes back with her to court. Arthur's like, I love this. Also, Enide is hot as hell. And so Arthur then like, kisses her because Arthur had caught the white stag. Big wedding. Big guest list that's got all kinds of people who come up from Celtic legend. Big old wedding tournament. And then the couple goes off to Erec's ancestral home, which is Estragal. And here they take up, like basically princeton duties, right? So like heir apparent duties. But here's the thing is that Erec is just really into banging his hot wife and being at home. This is bad, you understand. And basically, the idea here is that his love for Enide is going to like destroy his knightly powers, right? So Enide gets wind that everyone is like, I hear that Erec just sits at home banging his hot wife all day. That sounds gay. And she's like, I can't believe people are disrespecting my husband because of all the hot sex we're having. So like, she then tells him, and then he feels like angry and ashamed. And then basically he's like, okay, well, that is it. We're going off questing. Let's go, girl. Pack up. So his thing is like, you're going to ride in front of me, honey. Go pick your prettiest dress out. You're riding your horse in front of me, and don't speak to me unless I speak to you. Okay. So the idea here is Enide is a lure. And it's like, this is going to like make things dangerous. It's going to make the quest really difficult. And so surprise, there's danger. So first there's 3 robbers, and Erec kicks their asses. And then afterwards you got a second group. This is 5 of them, and they attack him, and Erec also kicks their asses, but it's like a longer fight. There's a lot more bloody things. Second thing happens. Enter 2 vicious, lustful counts. So one is like kind of very, very vain and into himself, and the other is kind of like just gonna like kidnap Enide, basically. So he's just like a brute. Okay. So first, the hot one visits the couple and tries to seduce Enide, and then he's like, and I'm gonna also like murder Erec because he's got wounded in this fight. The second one like drags them off to his castle because he thinks that Erec's dead. Okay, right? So he grabs Enide. And he tries to force Enide to marry him. So basically, like these 2 are supposed to be like representations of lust. Okay, they're both stupid, but they are an actual danger, right? So it's like either it's about like a mindful willfulness and violence in the sex drive, or like the fact that it's all consuming, it'll make you vain, right? So then you got a new set of incidents which involve a guy called Geoffrey le Petit, or Little Geoffrey. He's a proud and generous dwarf king. Okay. And he has to be challenged, and he vanquishes all the knights who approach his domain. So he gets in a fight with Erec and loses, and then they become homies. But later he almost fights Erec to the death because he didn't recognize him in armor at night, and then he has to kind of like get nursed back to vigor. So Yvain probably represents like pride or something. Right this here. Then at one point, Erec is kind of like still feeling bad about himself, still feeling like the shame and rejection of like, everyone at court laughing at him for fucking his wife. But like Gawain is like, homie, you just got to come back to court. Like you got your ass kicked fighting your dwarf friend. Why don't you come back to court? So he comes back. And then apparently, like, he comes back, and Arthur is, like, real sick and depressed, and then Erec, like, nurses his homies back to health. He checks in with his blokes. He gets Arthur back to health. So, basically, eventually, like, you have one last vignette where Erec frees a guy called Mabograin. It's I don't know, it's Welsh, so you might need to say it whatever, from a spell that his like girlfriend / Ami put on him, and it held him prisoner for years. And so basically here he was like, he made a promise to his girlfriend too quickly. And then like, and he was like, oh, I'll do anything that you want me to do. And then she's like, haha, how about you get tricked like Merlin did and I'm gonna imprison you forever. So basically that demonstrates like Erec's ability to liberate other people because he now has mastery over himself. Like he can help you out of your bad relationship situation because he's not just like thinking about his wife. So like Mabelgrain and his Ami are basically like the foil to Erec and Enide, right? So there you go. That's Erec and Enide.
So he never gets Enide back. She just
no, he does get Enide back. Sorry, I should have made that more clear. Like he rescued her and shit, and then he just does a bunch of other weird shit.
I was like, wow, man, they just like leave her there. That's
yeah. Sorry, I did not make that clear enough. Like, oh yeah, he definitely does that, and then like does other weird shit. You know?
Yeah.
Like yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what do we got? What do we got as far as new characters here?
So this isn't the first time Lancelot ever shows up in literature, but it's like the biggest one that he shows up in. It's like, whoa, Lancelot, how about that?
Yeah.
You got Erec being a fully fledged character. Obviously, you got your Geoffrey the Little. Geoffrey le Petit. Then you've got like the Count Gawain, like the bad counts, and then Mabelgrain, which is like a thing, and he comes up a lot. So, there are people that you expect to see like Arthur and Gawain and stuff like that who have been there before, but this is like these are the new boys. These are new people.
Yeah. So what does this add to the legend?
It's the first romance.
Woo!
Yay, romance. And basically what it does, what all the romances will do is it's starting to introduce morals, right? It's not just all like, we went to the fairy realm and there was a cauldron and then we left, right? So basically what we are meant to grapple with here is that like, how do you balance like the needs of a hero's life, which is like your honor and your reputation and like doing good things and heroic deeds out in the world with your internal life, and fucking your wife. Right. So like, how do you not get bogged down in that? So like you need to be a real chevalier. You have to have these two things in balance, right? To be a real knight, you have to be macking babes, but also starting fights, right? So basically what Equitatis is saying here is that like real mastery of a knight, like real chivalry, is kind of like an effort for progress and perfectionism. And this is also very interesting because it does this very new thing where both Erec and Enide are tested. Right? So Enide at the beginning, she's just like this mousy little girl who does whatever her dad wants, and then she's out like taking part in capers, and not in a way where it's like she's fighting, but it's like, oh, she's a good girl, isn't she? But she's out on the horse. She does the things that her husband says, and she manages like to resist the bad guys who kidnap her and stuff. So that's cool,
Yeah. And that moves us on to Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart. So what is this? What tell us about this guy.
Okay, so this is like the Lancelot story. This puts Lancelot on the fucking map. Okay. And so it starts off with this guy, I've got to butcher some French, Jean. He visits Arthur's court. And he's like, guess what? I stole a bunch of your land. Okay, cool. And then he's like, tricks Arthur into giving him Guinevere, basically, because he's like, got all this land, might as well give me your wife. Like, I don't know, it's complex. And then he's like, so I'm going to take you back to Gore, which is my homeland, and you're going to be a part of the prisoners that I've kind of like taken from Arthur's land. Okay.
Yeah.
So everyone's like, oh, we got to go get Guinevere back. Okay. So they're all running after Guinevere, trying to get hold of her. Lancelot ends up without a horse. And this...
Nice job, dude.
Yeah. And like, basically this is a major come down in the world of the knight. Entire fucking thing about a knight is you have a horse. Right. So he then runs into, guess what? A dwarf with a cart. It's another dwarf.
There's a lot of those going around.
Yeah, and the dwarf has a cart, and he's like, I know where Guinevere is, but I'm not going to tell you who this is until you get into the cart. And like, not only is it a cart, it's like a pillory cart, which is usually what would take people off to be punished. And so like, it's shameful to be in it. And Lancelot's like, I don't give a fuck. I'm out here trying to rescue Guinevere. So people are like, oh, well, this is very shameful. But Lancelot doesn't give a fuck because he's just trying to do the right thing, right? So while he's on his way trying to get to Guinevere, Lancelot gets helped by a lot of very hot ladies.
Woo!
Ooh, so like, you know, he fights with a lot of knights, mostly like because they'll be all like, I hear that you're that guy who rode in a cart, and he's like, hey, get fucked.
He's like, how dare you talk about my cart like that, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, exactly. And then he's hanging with our homie Gawain. But like eventually they kind of like decide that they're going to take different routes to Gore. And Lancelot's like, I'm going to go the faster way over the sword bridge, which is much more dangerous because it is literally a very big sword blade. And it shows how, you know, committed to getting Guinevere back Lancelot is. So he gets to Gore, and he figures out that Guinevere's pissed at him, and she doesn't really tell him why. Okay. He also finds out that, like, actually the ruler there is, like, a pretty nice guy called King Badamagu, who is kind of like, he basically, Melegan is like his fail son and a bad person. Okay. So the king's nice, the son's bad. Guinevere tells him off, and Lancelot's like, okay, well, I'm going to go find Sir Gawain, who came not on the sword bridge, and no one's seen him. So while Lancelot is gone, Guinevere is like hearing, you know, rumors that he died, and she's like, oh, that sucks. So like, I'm going to be nice to him if he comes back or whatever. So he comes back to Badamagu's court, and Guinevere is like, yeah, but I was mad at you because you hesitated before you got into the pillory cart. How she knew that, I don't know. And you should have just got right in, whatever. Okay. So they get back together, and then they have sex.
Nice.
Well, I mean, or, you know, maybe they just do hand stuff.
Maybe she topped him off,
Yeah. And so Lancelot then, like, bleeds all over the sheets. And Mélenchon is like, oh, you're cheating on Arthur. And Lancelot is like, how dare you? And I'm going to fight.
Ironic.
And he's like, I'm gonna fight Mélenchon. And so the King Badamagu is like, look, why don't we come? Like, we'll do this the right way. You come back in a year, and we'll have this fight. We'll have this fight at King Arthur's court. Okay. And also everyone that my bastard son, well, he's not really a bastard, but my bitch ass son kidnapped can go back, right? So they go back, right? So now, like, Lancelot is kind of like imprisoned, and we start looking at that. So they, like, after all this happened, basically Lancelot goes off to like find Gawain, who we still haven't seen. Then he gets tricked by another dwarf. There's just so many dwarfs. Who is like one of Mélenchon's henchmen, who like basically takes him captive. Okay, so then they send a fake letter from Lancelot to Guinevere saying, Guinevere, you need to go back to Arthur's court and you'll find Lancelot there. So, and then at the same time, Lancelot's party minus Lancelot falls Gawain, who also is like, oh shit, well, I guess we'll just go back and Lancelot will be there. Then they get home, they realize Lancelot isn't there. And so basically Mélenchon like comes back to demand his battle with Lancelot, and Gawain is like, well, I'm going to fight in his place. And then, you know, they decide that they're going to fight in another year's time. So meanwhile, tournament gets organized. Guinevere is supposed to preside over it. Lancelot hears about it, and he basically convinces the jailer's wife to grant him freedom so that he can compete. So he arrives at the tournament, and nobody knows his armor. And Guinevere still recognizes him, though, because of like how good he is at the tournament. So to test his identity, she sends him a message that he should fight badly and lose. And he complies. Then she reverses the message, and then he wins, and then like promptly kind of like disappears to go back to his imprisonment. because that's what he told the jailer's wife he would do. So Lancelot goes back. Mélenchon imprisons him in a really high impenetrable tower. And there, Mélenchon's sister, that like Lancelot had done something nice for, like basically learns about Lancelot's disappearance, rescues him, and like nurses him back to help. Lancelot then goes back to Logres, which is where Arthur's court is, at the moment that Gawain and Mélenchon are in battle. And Lancelot then steps in, vanquishes Mélenchon. Kind of the end. But it's not really the end, because Chretien was like, well, someone else is going to finish this off for me. Okay, bye. I'm done. I don't feel like doing more than this. It's like, okay. But that's where it ends at any rate.
King shit. Yeah, who are the new characters that we get in here?
Shout out Marie of Champagne, and it's notable because he starts off this whole thing by saying, thanks so much, shout out to my girl, my patroness, Marie of Champagne, who is Eleanor of Aquitaine's daughter with King Louis. And that is notable because she's like running this court where it's alleged that the art of courtly love gets written. And so it's like, oh, here we go. Like this is a classic courtly love tale about cucking, the thing that Marina of Champagne fucking loves. Right? Cool.
That's awesome. She must have loved her mom.
Yeah. You also have Mélenchon. Then you got a guy called Count Guinable. And he's like a snitch. Okay, so he hears like Guinevere talking about how she's in love with someone. And then, like, she goes off with Sir Kay to find Mélenchon. And the Count is all like, oh, that's who Guinevere was having sex with. Okay? Which is why, very interestingly, Lancelot is able to defeat Mélenchon in the kind of battle for Guinevere's honor, because she got accused of having sex with Kay, not Lancelot. And God like wouldn't allow you to win if it was true, right? So you know, and then you got your various Kartdorf, your varying whatevers. You got King Badamagu, and then also the Lady of Noaz and the Lady of Pomelgois, and they basically are the ones who are hosting the tournament where Guinevere finds out that Lancelot is still alive.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what does this add to the legend?
I mean, shout out Marie of Champagne. And basically what it adds is like, cucking is back on the menu, boys. And not only is cucking back, but it's cool as hell. Thank you.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah. Like, and so this is just like really very much of its time, very much a milieu. Okay. And you know, like basically like they're having all of their fun adultery time, like even like when Mélenchon has them in prison. So it's like that makes you super vulnerable to courtiers talking shit. And so like basically like this is a way of kind of saying that like, yeah, like maybe like keep it tidier than that, but like go for it, you know? So also like, you know, one of the things that we see here is that like, you know, usually Chretien's characters don't want to be shamed, right? Like that's the whole thing in Erec and Enide. Like Erec doesn't want you like talking shit about how he's just having sex with his wife all the time. But in this, Lancelot doesn't care, and he's willing to do anything for Guinevere, who is his mistress, right? So like basically this is like, you know, we're going on with this. We're also, a thing that you also see here is that like the idea that like Arthur's work is never done. He's got a really good kingdom, but there's also like these guys who just like come in and out, will kidnap your wife or whatever. So it's basically showing the need to keep the series going. Yeah.
Cool. Neat. Neat. So yeah. So is it? I was going to ask you a question. Shit. Yep. Don't know. Yep.
It's not about Lancelot.
It's all about Lancelot. It's fun that it's never finished. I like that. Like he's just like, nah, I'm good.
Yep.
Pulling the old George Martin, just fuck it.
I know, like, and he does it again, because he also does that with our next one as well.
Yep.
Just
yep. We get Yvain, the Knight of the Lion.
One of the best names.
Yeah, that is a good name. Mm-hmm. I like Yvain. I like, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so it's...
Also, I guess T-Vain.
T-Vain, yeah. T-Vain. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so this starts off with another celebration at court. You know, we've had Easter and stuff before. So Arthur is celebrating Pentecost at Carduel in Wales. Okay, so in comes a knight named Gawain, and he's all like, oh, I have a cool story about something that happened to me 7 years ago. I went into the forest and I met a giant, and he told me about this spring that's in the mysterious woods there. And if you took water from the spring and you put it onto a nearby stone, then like a huge storm will take place. And Gawain is like, oh, cool. And that word, I'm going to go check this out. He finds the stone, puts the water on the spring onto it. Huge storm comes up, surprise, and a big knight appears. Okay, mysterious knight. He challenges Gawain to a duel because he's angry about all the damage from the storm. And Gawain gets his ass beat. And he's so like humiliated that he kind of like never had spoken about it until now. Okay. Meanwhile, Yvain, who is Gawain's cousin, is like, oh, word, homie. Well, I'm gonna avenge you. Okay. And
I love being so mad. Like, I'm gonna avenge my cousin. Like, okay, man. I mean, like, I don't like hate my cousins or anything, but I'm
probably not gonna avenge them.
No, I'm not fighting to the death about it.
I'm not going to avenge them when they like went and started a storm when they were told that it would, like whatever. So, King Arthur then is like, okay, well, I also want to see this whole like spring rock storm situation. Okay. And he's like, come on, guys, let's all go check it out. But Yvain is mad because he wants to like avenge his cousin by himself. So he like sneaks off alone, meets the giant, sprinkles the water onto the stone, and the big storm comes, and then the knight comes and is like, I swear to fucking God, I thought I said stop making storms. Challenges Yvain to a duel, big brutal fight. Yvain eventually smashes his helmet in and cuts the guy's head in two.
Get fucked.
Yeah, like, then the knight is not dead, but like goes back to his castle and dies at his castle. And then Yvain is like chasing him down and gets trapped between the two portcullises. Like he like goes into the barbican and gets like trapped. And the knights are like, well, we're gonna kill this guy, right? But at the same time, the lady of the castle's damsel runs out to rescue him and makes him invisible using some magic rings that she has in her possession.
Woo! Magic rings, let's go.
She then persuades her lady, who is the lady Laudine du Landuc, to like, why don't you marry the guy who killed your husband? You know, like he kicked your husband's ass, so like clearly he can protect the domain or whatever. And Yvain, meanwhile, is like, I am immediately in love with the widow of the guy I just killed. And the lady Laudine is like, yeah, sure, why not? They get married. Fine. I love to marry my husband's murderer. So anyway, like King Arthur, then he's off on his little adventure, puts the spring onto the stone, the knight appears and challenges. And Sir Kay, who you'll remember from the earlier ones, he's like the guy, he's like the nice one, is suddenly like an asshole. And he's like a big braggart, and he's like, no, I want to fight, right? But now the knight who's like showing up to be like, don't fucking start storms with the stone is Yvain, right? Because he's taken the position. So he kicks the shit out of Sir Kay. And then he's like, hey, guess what, homies? It was me all along. And everyone is like, oh, word. Gawain once again is like, why don't you come back home to Britain, and like you need to like come and get involved in some tournaments and prove that you're not just like having sex with your hot wife that you love all the time. So this again. And so his wife is like, okay, yeah, you can leave if you come back in a year. And she gives him a set of rings that will keep him safe as long as, you know, she is uppermost in his mind. So Yvain goes out, very successful in the tournaments, but he enjoys them so much that he forgets to come back to his wife within a year. Ooh. So Laudine is mad, sends one of her damsels to like call him a hypocrite and take back the rings. Yvain is naturally distraught, and he goes out of his mind with remorse. And he goes off to live in the woods, and he's cared for by a hermit until one day a noblewoman who's going through it, Lady Nourrisson, finds him sleeping naked under a tree. She's like, who's this naked guy? That's cool. She like anoints him with a magic potion, and basically he gets his sanity back and becomes himself again. So he wants to regain, his lost love, goes out to the castle. On the way there, he fights off 3 evil knights and rescues a lion who was about to be killed by a dragon. And then the lion becomes his homie.
Nice.
So, he's like, we all know he's very honorable because he's the homies with the lion. And he arrives and he finds the damsel Lunette is tied to a stake and about to be burned alive. He frees her and then pleads for, his lady's forgiveness and like both for herself and Yvain. And she's like, yeah, we can get back together. And we can also live happily ever after with the lion. So, yay. Hooray.
Our lion Aslan.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, yeah. All right, what do we got? Who are the new characters here?
So the new characters here are your boy Yvain, obviously. You got your lady Laudine, Lunette the damsel, and her magic rings and stuff, and Calogrenant, who is Yvain's cousin. And interesting, he's supposed to be German, which I find cool.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these guys are just like, French and British or whatever. But not your homie here. Yeah. And then also you have got Lady Nourrisson, who like makes him get back together. So yeah.
So what does this add to the legend as it grows?
Okay, so before where we were like, Erec and Enide, the stories you need to balance things. This is like in the opposite direction. So Erec's unbalance was that he was too hot for his wife and didn't go do great things. But here the imbalance is that he got distracted and took his eye off the ball with his wife and was too busy like doing tournaments and having fun. Right. Yeah. So this is in the opposite direction, but it's the same thing about like, be nice to your wife. How about that? Because it's like maybe Erec and Enide came across as like, fuck your wife a little bit too much. So it's like, it's the same thing about like the balance between love and chivalrous activity. Yeah. There
seems to be a lot of that going around. Yeah. And that brings us to the last of the poems by Detroit, and that is Percival, the story of the Grail.
Yeah, like this is possibly, Lancelot, Knight of the Cart is really important because Lancelot becomes so important. But the Percival Grail story is so important because it introduces the whole Grail thing, right? So you start with Percival, and he kind of like grew up out like on the edges of civilization in Wales. Okay. And he wants a purpose in his life. So he's like, I'm going to become one of King Arthur's knights after he runs into a group of knights. And he's like, I want to be just like them. And his mom is like, I would rather you didn't do that because of all of the fighting. And he's like, yeah, sucked in, and runs off to join King Arthur's knights. And he immediately makes a name of himself by killing like a quarrelsome knight. But Sir Kay doesn't like him. So again, Sir Kay cast as like the dickhead here. And Percival's like, I'm going to revenge myself on Sir Kay. So he's like, I'm going to go and do like a big quest that is very heroic. And he rescues a poor girl called Blanchefleur. And then he's like, sends the evidence back to King Arthur. And it's like, I'm out here rescuing damsels. You like that shit? He then sends out to visit his mother, who wasn't happy about him being a knight. On the way there, he visits the Fisher King's castle and sees all kind of crazy shit, as is you want in the Fisher King's castle. So there's like men and women like carrying around weird objects from room to room in a kind of like ritualistic way. And one of those objects is a grail. Okay. later on, Percival finds out that his mom has died and that the Grail could maybe be of like some way of like saving the king. Like there might be a threat to the king's life, and so he needs the Grail. Okay, so it's like some random lady is all like, "Oh, you might want to get that Grail because it could help, right?" So basically, then Percival kind of is like, "Well, I gotta get hold of the Grail." And then I am got to go back to the court in order to get hold of like everything for Arthur, and also to show Sir Kay what the fuck's up, right?
Yeah.
And then the second part of the poem, which is unfinished because my man, no follow through, basically introduces the best new knight, Gawain, King Arthur's brave nephew, and like talks about Gawain's stuff and what's going on there. So this is quite interesting because, you know, Gawain figured prominently in the other in like the other of ones already. You know, he's the one who's always like, oh, yo, I think that you should like come back to England and everything. But this is like the first one that really kind of like introduces him and is like, oh shit, we better like say something about this, right? So yeah, it's just, it kind of like starts off like it's a bit listy. It's a bit like, here are all these things.
Yeah, we gotta fill out his Wikipedia entry real quick before we
exactly
before we move on.
And then he just walks away. So there you go. It's incredibly important, but it's also like very fragmented, right?
That's awesome. Yeah. So who are the new characters for this one?
Percival, obviously, loves his mom, devastated by her debt, very, very willing to do whatever it takes. You've got also, I mean, like, it's not introducing Gawain, but it's like fleshing Gawain out, you know? So like really kind of talking about like Gawain's importance and being like, you know, and he is the king's nephew, you know, whereas because before, you know, there's like Mordred's the king's nephew or like whatever the hell. And so now it's like, no. And then we also get like more Kay bashing. It's not like we didn't know Kay before, but you know, it's like this idea. Then of course, like the Fisher King, who becomes very, very important. In all of these things. So yeah, it's kind of like the expected characters in a lot of ways, but these are like the big ones that stand out and are kind of like new and exciting, right?
Yeah. I like how I do like, you could see character progression because like Kay like starts out in you know, in the first ones we talked about where he's like you know, he's like helping Guinevere. He just, you know, he's there. He seems like a nice guy. And then he gets kind of more like an asshole. Now he's like just a total jerk. Like he taunts the kid, slaps a woman, you know, he's like,
yeah, completely.
You know, they're like, well, we got to have an asshole here, I guess. That's you, buddy.
And it's like,
you drew the short straw.
We're sending Kay in. And it's really interesting, like this complete revamp of Kay's character that he undergoes. So yeah, I find it quite interesting, you know, like the way that they really kind of like go in on changing that completely. It's also quite funny because it's like within all of this, like you're like, oh, so this is the story of Percival, the story of the Grail, and now like let me interrupt this to talk about Gawain. Like, all right,
yeah.
Cool. Like,
thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Sounds fucking good, homie. Like
helpful. Yeah, it's a good thing you wrote this instead of finishing the fucking poem.
I know, right? Like,
Chretien.
Like, and yeah, and it's like it's an interesting one, right? So it's like there is a lot of kind of like backing and forthing, and like but I find it quite like compelling. Because of all of the weirdness of it. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess what does this add? And I mean, I guess it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, like the Grail, number one. Yeah. But there are also these interesting things because, like, one thing that will begin to come up a lot is what you owe to your mother.
Oh.
This is a thing. And also this kind of, like, worry of mothers about them kind of, like, you know, what their kids becoming knights and like the inherent danger there, because, you know, we kind of think of these knights as superheroes. Of course they're going to be fine, but yeah. So otherwise, within this, you also get the idea that actually it is a little bit stupid to run off to become a knight and to be Percival, because he isn't really understanding the dangers, and he's really naive and doesn't really know what he's doing, which is kind of what is being hinted at when he gets to the Fisher King's castle. Like, he should have known that the Grail was there. Like, he should have been aware of all these things that were coming, but he's super naive, so he can't like read iconography. So he's just basically in out of his depth. And so it's kind of like a warning about how, no, like, you do need to kind of like get involved. Yeah. And like, and probably being prepared to be a knight is as important as just like going out there and kicking ass, right?
Yeah, I like that, like, the sword in this case, or I'm sorry, that the Grail in this case is literally just like a MacGuffin. It's just like a thing, like, oh, you should have known it was going to heal. It could heal the king, even though like the king wasn't technically sick when you left. You could have known that or inferred it. And then it's also there with like the lance, you know, and it's just kind of there. And, you know, it's not the like central premise of the whole thing, you know. It doesn't rise to that level of importance until much later.
And it's like there are things, so it's like, you know, the Fisher King's sick, and like, you know, Percival, there's like the questions you're supposed to ask in order to get hold of the Grail, but he doesn't know the right questions to ask. Like, he doesn't know the things, right? And he could have like healed the Fisher King, but he doesn't. Right. You know, there are all these little things where it's like, you know, like he should have known to, like, the Fisher King has a broken sword that you're supposed to mend, but he doesn't know that. So, you know, the Fisher King can't get avenged. And maybe these could kind of like be ways of introducing things that he's going to overcome. But it's very difficult to see that. It could also be that it's supposed to be kind of like, mirroring the things that Gawain does in his bit, but it's hard to say. And also, there's just absolutely no fucking way of getting through all of that. So I'm skimming, baby. I'm skimming for y'all.
I also like the Fisher King, you know, because that just, it shows up here randomly, and it just becomes this like important cultural touchstone. Like, it inspires like Bran Stark in Game of Thrones. The baseball movie and the book The Natural is actually like a version of the Fisher King thing, and then there's also some Dark Souls 3 stuff that's in there. I find, you know, here's this random Fisher King, here you go. And they're just like, yep, cool. It's, we're just going to use this forever for some reason. That's, those are the French poems. And now we come to the Welsh romances, which, are written by an anonymous author in Middle Welsh and seem to be either alternate versions of de Troyes' poems, or de Troyes' poems are alternate versions of these, or whatever, written at roughly the same time or slightly earlier. And they're going to be similar but not the exact same, and they kind of add to the overall thing in the end. So let's start with Yvain, or the Lady of the Fountain.
Okay, so we start off with King Arthur having a snooze, and he's waiting for dinner, and his knights, who in this case are Yvain, Sinan, and Kay, they are like, well, let's tell some stories. Okay. So Sinan is like, oh, let me tell you a story from when I was a young idiot. And like, I came to a castle. There were 24 beautiful women inside. And they were hosting me real nice. And like, the guy from the castle wanted to know what the purpose of my journey was. And Sinan is like, oh yeah, I am looking for someone to get the better of him, because I'm always like kicking ass and taking names, and I've never been beaten up. So he learns about the Black Knight who lives in the woods nearby. So the next day, Sinan goes off, and he finds that said Black Knight is a giant who's got like one eye and has power over animals. So the Black Warden of the Woods gives Sinan a big long and complicated directions that are going to lead him to like. Sorry, that's the warden, not the knight. I'm getting them confused. So this is the Black Warden, and the Black Warden is like, let me tell you where you can go get your ass kicked. Like, okay. Go find the Black Knight, and he'll kick your ass. So the Black Knight does indeed go kick Enid's ass, but he's like, but I'm going to let you live so that you can go tell everyone what a bitch you are. So like he goes back to the warden. The warden's like, told you would get your ass kicked. And like the 24 women are like, well, whatever. I don't really care. Goes back to his own court and is like, basically then Arthur wakes up and the story stops and the men like all have dinner. Right. Mm-hmm. So the next day, Owen is like, I'm going to run away from court because I'm going to go beat the Black Knight. Right. That's what I'm going to do. So he finds the castle from Enid's story, meets all the hot women, and then he like finds the warden, follows the complicated journey, and goes back into the Black Knight's realm. Owen fatally wounds the Black Knight, who then runs away. Owen chases him to a giant castle, and then the Black Knight gets through it, but guess what? He's trapped in the portcullis. Stop me if you heard this one before. And it kills Owen's horse. Out comes a beautiful woman named Luned, who's, Lunette again. And she gives him a ring that'll make him invisible again. And so like Owen then is able to hide from the castle guards, follows Luned into her chambers and like spends the day there. Okay. Then he hears a scream and some crying, and Luned says, okay, well, the guy who owns the castle is dead. He watches a big funeral procession from out her window, and he notices a hottie. And Luned says, oh, that's the Lady of the Well, and she's the Black Knight's wife. So Luned then, like, washes Owen up and feeds him, and then, like, he goes down and she visits the Lady of the Well on Owen's behalf. And Luned is like, yo, you know how, like, the castle's undefended now that the Black Knight is dead, so I will find you a replacement guy who can marry you and protect it. And the Lady of the Well is like, yeah, okay, whatever. So Luned waits a couple days and then is like, here's a guy. But the Lady of the Well recognizes that Owain is the one who killed the Black Knight. But she's like, well, but he is good. So guess what? Yeah. They get married, and they defend the kingdom for 3 years. Meanwhile, Arthur's like, where the fuck did Wayne go? Did Owen go, right? Like,
yeah.
So
what the hell happened? Why do these guys keep leaving for 3.5 years, and then I have to go find them and knock them out of a stupor? What the fuck?
Yeah. And so like they do the same thing. It's seen as like, oh, maybe he went to like go do the thing that he heard me bragging about. Oh, look, the Black Knight shows up and kicks whose ass? Kay's ass. Surprise. And he also defeats all of Arthur's knights, including Arthur's nephew Gwalchmai, who's there, which is Gawain, right? And Owen recognizes Gawain and is like, oh, sorry, didn't mean to kick her ass. Sorry. Why don't you guys come to my castle? And then they hang out for 3 months feasting, which is cool. So then Arthur is like, hey, Lady of the Well, can we take Owen back to court? She's like, okay, you can do that. But he stays there for 3 years. And then one day a woman arrives at the court, takes Owen's magic ring, calls him a deceitful cheat and traitor. Owen gets depressed, wanders around the kingdom in disgrace. He's found by a widowed countess, and she tells him that she lost her husband's kingdoms to a neighbor. So he's like, well, I'm going to go kick the neighbor's ass and get your kingdoms back. Keeps wandering around. He then kills a serpent, which is important, and befriends a lion, right? And then he discovers that Luned, who helped him get together with his wife, has been trapped in a stone vault. So he rescues her by killing a monster. And then like goes back to the kingdom of the Black Knight and is like, hey baby, I'm sorry I left you here. And he takes the Lady of the Well back to Arthur's court. And then finally he goes back to the castle of the 24 women who are under the spell of a dark knight. Owain fights the knight and defeats him, but spares his life. Goes back to court with the 24 women and like goes back. So this is a lot like, it's like the Yvain kind of story or what have you, but with important tweaks, and also it's finished. So yeah.
So who are the new characters here?
The Black Knight is kind of like the important one, right? Now the other people are all kind of just like reimaginings because like Owen is Yvain, right?
Yeah.
And then, but there is, like, and Luned is Lunette, and the Lady of the Well, it's just another way of doing it. And you've got Gawain, and this kind of like reconfiguring that all happened before. But basically, we're just Welshing it up.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna Welsh it. Fuck Chretien de Troyes. This is like, it's Welsh time. Let's fucking go, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what does it add to the legend?
Okay, so first of all, we have everything is kicked off by telling, right? And so it's like, stories about knights are important because it inspires other people to great deeds. That's what's going on here. But also here we have this big emphasis on humbleness, right? Because Sinan can be like, oh yeah, I got my ass kicked, right? Like Black Knight beat my ass. There you go. Owain can't admit things like this, right? And he can also like beat the Black Knight's ass, but he can't take as good care of his lands as the Black Knight could because he just like fucks off to court again, right? And like, so it's kind of about, again, this is being pulled in two directions at once, but it's like, on the one hand, he's too ashamed to go back, but also he's too ashamed to go to Arthur's court. And so he kind of like tries to run away. And so it's kind of like, this is sort of a story about how Wayne is kind of like trapped in a cycle of violence of his own making. Right. But what he does manage to do in the end is bring his lady to court. It's like, well, if you're gonna, want to be around with Arthur, fucking around, you need to at least get your wife here. So there's at least some closure on that part.
Yeah. Yep. And then we got Geraint and Enide.
Yeah.
Geraint and Enide. There we go.
Yeah, Geraint. Fun fact. I can say that one because there's a very important Welsh cyclist, Geraint Thomas, who won the Tour de France, and that's how I know how to say it. So,
Nice.
Basically, Geraint says that, it's the same thing. Everyone's all like, oh, you love your wife too much. Fuck off. Go out and ride the horse in front of me. She's like, that seems weird, but okay. They get intercepted by 3 tall knights on horseback who want to, rob him and kill him. And Enide here then decides to go against what Geraint has told her, and she's like, yo, there's knights up here. He kills them all. But he's mad at Enide for having told him. So they go further on, and like Enide is also now like driving the horses that he took off the guys he killed. And she sees more danger. And this time it's another group of 3 men, but one of them is huge. So one more time she's like, homie, like, bro, knight's coming, one is huge. Again, Geraint wins, but he's still mad at Enide for not listening to his stupid command. So then they come across a young boy who offers to give them food, which they accept. They then say, hey, do you want one of these horses? And you can also have like the arms of one of the knights that we've stolen. And the boy's like, oh, that's awesome. Why don't you come up to my master's palace? So Enide and Geraint go up, and they go to the palace of the Earl of Limor. And the Earl sees that Enide is super unhappy. And he's like, hey, what's going on with you? And the two have met before, and the Earl Limor is like, oh, I used to have the hots for you back in the day. You're the only one I've ever loved. And she's like, that's cool, homie, but this isn't really the time or the place. But if you want to like get with it, then you could steal me from Geraint and like pretend to be like kidnapping me. And so they run off the next day. So anyway, like basically the Earl kind of is like following the couple, and like Enide notices that like he's following him, right? But she, again, Geraint said, don't speak. And so she's like, so instead she like points and shows that there's like dust rising up from the Earl's horse. So, at this point, Geraint is injured, because they fight, right? Okay. And there's no one around to help. So Enide, and the very badly injured Geraint have to take up refuge in the home of Earl Durham, who, is known to be like a bad guy. He's cruel, right? So Garrett like gets better, but is pretending to be unconscious. Earl Durham wants to like get with Enide, and is like, I account you as mine, which is to say that he's probably going to take her forcibly. She then refuses to eat or drink, and the frustrated Earl slaps her across the face. That means that Gawain is like, okay, I can't fake sleep it anymore. And then he cuts off the Earl's head. So, like, this all seems fine, but Enid's kind of, like, worried about her cousin Yvain, who had been, like, previously sacked in her father's castle. So they go back to Camelot, discover that, like, Yvain is, like, reformed and is now a knight of the Round Table. And everyone's like, oh, I guess we could just, like, hang out at Camelot. That'll be cool. Nice.
Nice. Did your thing bug out for a minute there? Because it just stopped talking for like 30 seconds.
I saw it. Mine was all fine. I think that my internet connection to you went unstable there, so I should be fine.
Nope, that's cool. Just checking. Yeah. So who are the new characters here?
So like there aren't really any new characters per se because this is like a new Welshifying of the old one. But it's like the particulars are different, right? Because Enide is like kind of doing the right thing, even though like she's not like timid, right? So she is willing to kind of like go against her husband. It's just again kind of like Welshing it up a bit. But one of the things that it does introduce as a new character is Camelot.
Interesting.
So Côte de Toise, it's like, oh yeah, like this is Logs and this is the place and like whatever. But it's like they're like, no, we're going to Camelot. So there you go.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So other than Camelot, what does it add to the whole milieu?
A lot of don't be a dick to your wife, right?
Seems like good advice.
Yeah, like you're putting your wife in a super impossible situation because she actually really loves him and wants to do the right thing by him. And sometimes that right thing is going against his express orders and prioritizing his safety. Instead of making him happy. So that kind of like proves her deep love and, you know, her ability to act of her own volition. So interestingly, it like humanizes Enide a lot. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And so, yeah, it brings us to our last story today. And this is the Welsh romance of Peredur, son of Efrog.
Yeah, I guess.
Efrog, yep.
Efrog, I guess. I don't know. So Peredur inherits his father's lands, kind of like up in North Wales, after his brothers and dad die in battle. His mom wants him to not get involved in war, right? But a bunch of knights come back and come to his lands, and so Peredur learns about it. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to become one of King Arthur's knights. And his mom is like, look, I'm going to give you my blessing, but you have to behave in a moral way. So off he goes on like a fucked up scrawny horse. And, you know, he's poor. He's got like a shitty saddle or whatever. And he's like, I'm going to go learn how to be a knight. So after 2 days, he finds another knight called the Proud One of the Clearing. And the Proud One of the Clearing, super fearsome knight, guards his home. And Peredur kind of like accidentally insults him.
Ooh.
And then the Proud One then kind of like sets out and is like, well, I'm going to go kick this kid's ass. And is like out in pursuit of him. So meanwhile, over at Arthur's court, an unnamed rude knight insults the host and issues a challenge to everybody present, right? He leaves at the same time Peredur arrives. And so the court then laughs at Peredur and is like, you know, shitty equipment and his scrawny horse and the fact that he wants to be a knight. And they're like, oh yeah, well, you got to go defeat the knight who just insulted us all if you want to join the Round Table. And then so he's like, oh, okay. So he like goes off to find the knight and he kills him with a dart. Okay.
Nice.
So, meanwhile, a knight from Arthur's court, Owen, follows Peredur. And he's shocked that Peredur could like, you know, defeat the rude knight this easily. And he's like, okay, well, take his horse and his armor. Now you got a nice horse and nice armor. And he's like, okay, well, you know, why don't you tour the land? Well, sorry, Peredur tells Owen that he's going to tour the land in King Arthur's name. And he's also going to take his revenge on Kay, who insulted him the most at court. Surprise. So basically, then Peredur is like attacked by over 12 knights at various times on his travels. He defeats them all, but doesn't kill them, and sends them back to Arthur's court to say, Peredur kicked my ass, right? So Kay starts getting worried. Meanwhile, Peredur's like traveling all through the lands. He meets a couple of men who say that they're his uncles, and help him learn how to be a knight. He keeps defeating men and sending them back to court to talk about it. And eventually, Arthur's like, I'm going to go find Peredur because it sounds like he's kicking a lot of knights' asses, and that's interesting to me. So in one castle, Peredur's found a family who are like going broke. And the maiden in the castle is like, you can have sex with me if you get us food. Peredur's like, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to defend your castle, and I'm going to defeat all these guys who are like coming after it. And every time he beats someone who's attacking the castle, he demands that the person he's beaten give land and money to the maiden. So he saves the household from poverty, leaves. Okay. Then Peredur goes and defeats the proud one of the clearing. He saves a house that was being bothered by witches, and the witches agree to teach him how to ride a horse better, and like to be a better knight, which is cool. Then Arthur finds Peredur, who defeats all of Arthur's knights, as well, and especially Kay. Fight leaves Kay injured, and he's angry at Peredur. Meanwhile, Walkmai / Gawain, Arthur's Dave, goes to, and he's like, hey, you seem cool, let's be friends. Gwalchmai then takes Peredur back to meet up with Arthur, and he gets welcomed at court. At court, Peredur also meets Angharad la Urog, and falls in love with her immediately, but she doesn't love him back.
Ooh.
So he's determined to win her love and swears that he will not, quote, utter a word to any Christian until his love is returned. So he's like, I've taken a vow to not speak to Christians. So the next day, he leaves the court and wins a bunch of battles, defeats a lot of enemies, and he meets a lot of people, but none of them are Christian, so he can talk the whole time anyway. He keeps his word, and he sends all of the defeated enemies back to Arthur's court, right? And they all get converted to Christianity. Hooray.
Ooh.
So after like a long time wandering around like this, Peredur is basically unrecognizable. So he goes back to Arthur's court, but he meets Kay on the way, and he won't speak a word to Christians, right, because of this thing. And so Kay harasses him about how he won't talk to him. Peredur kind of like ignores it and goes back to court anyway. He defeats a knight who's been harassing Arthur's court, and he gets this new title, which is the Mute Knight. And Angahard is like, I love the Mute Knight, but she doesn't know that it's Peredur, right? Eventually, Peredur finally breaks his silence. Eventually, Arthur and Peredur then go hunting. Peredur finds a hall that's owned by a one-eyed, black-haired man who kills everyone he enters. They fight. Peredur defeats the black-haired man who asks for mercy. He tells Peredur about a serpent that guards treasure, which took out his eye. That's why he only has one eye. So, and basically he's like, I'm the black oppressor, and you can go kill this snake, right? And the black oppressor then fights. Peredur gets defeated. So then Peredur then goes off to find this snake. On the way, he finds a castle that can resurrect the dead, and he saves its inhabitants from a monster that kills them every day. Cool. He befriends a knight called Edlim Gwedelfgoch, who offers himself into Peredur's service. He defeats about 300 men and reunites with his ex-girlfriend Edlim. Meanwhile, a mysterious woman gives him a magic stone to help him defeat the serpent, but only in exchange for like his promise to love her. Peredur and his ex Edlim arrive at the Serpent's Mound. Peredur then defeats like hundreds of knights who are waiting around for the serpent to die because the serpent's got all this treasure. So none of these people want to fight the serpent. They're just waiting to see if he dies. So he kicks them all in the ass, kills the serpent, takes the treasure, and goes back to the knights. And he gives the knights into his service, and he gives Edlim the stone. And basically then Peredur comes to a town where the Empress of Great Constantinople is visiting. Which is interesting. So, okay.
Yep.
So she is hosting a combat tournament, and she's like, I'm going to marry the bravest man. Peredur enters and he wins. He meets the Empress and realizes that she's the mysterious woman who gave him the magic stone.
Mm-hmm.
And they get married and rule Constantinople for 14 years. Meanwhile, Peredur goes back to Arthur's court because you just can't stay away even if you're in Constantinople ? And a woman dressed in black arrives riding on a mule. She gets angry with Peredur and says that he isn't worthy, and he's like, "What? What the fuck?" Okay. The woman tells Arthur that there has been a besieged castle and a beautiful woman has promised herself to anyone who will rescue her. So then she leaves. And Arthur's knights are all like, "Oh, yeah, cool, let's go save the trapped woman." Except for Peredur, who is like, "How come that lady hates me so much?" And he goes off to find out why the lady hates him so much. And he finds out about the Fortress of Wonders, and he wants to go find that. He finds the fortress, the gates are open, he enters. Inside of it, there's a traditional board game called Gwydwyl.
Okay.
Gwydbwyll. Okay,
not a goddamn vowel among them.
Yeah, yeah. Basically they're playing this game, right? So Peredur picks a side, but his side loses. He then becomes angry with them and throws the pieces into a lake. And then here comes the woman dressed in black, and she's all like, "You suck. Here's a series of challenges for you." And he's got to kill a knight, capture a monstrous stag. He does all the challenges and discovers that actually the woman in black is his cousin in disguise. She tells him off and says that his uncle was killed by the witches who taught him how to fight. So then Peredur enlists Arthur's help, and they all go kill the witches. The end.
Damn. His cousin should not have done blackface. That's all I'm saying.
That's all I'm saying. Ooh, yeah.
That's my takeaway here. Yeah. So who are our new characters?
Yeah, you got Edlim Gledif Goch. You got Angahard Law Yorog. You got the game of Will,
yep.
Which is a character in and of itself. They say it's kind of analogous to chess, but it's different. And you kind of see all these different ways of looking at it. And kind of new characters. So it's here's his cousins who are pissed off. And here's these witches and here's all these ways of doing things. I mean, you've got the fucking Empress of Constantinople suddenly. So yeah, that's quite funny. Yeah.
Nice. Yep. Yeah. And, so what does it specifically add? Or, yeah.
Yeah. Most particularly interesting about this. Well, first of all, there's all these exes hanging around. And he falls in love and out of love with women, and he's hanging out with various women, and then he all ditches them for the Empress of Constantinople, which is quite funny. So it's the first time you kind of see this idea that love actually may be fleeting, which is interesting. But what I really like about this are the concerns about cyclical violence. Right. So here, it's his mom doesn't want him becoming a knight because it's your brother and dad all died in battle. I don't want that happening to you. And it's lo and behold, he just goes off and does exactly the same thing, does all of these terrible, dangerous things. Right. And, as a part of that, his uncle ends up getting killed because, he's learning to fight and these witches are helping him and that's all happening. He's just spending all of his time fighting and getting offended and doing all of these things. And it's actually pointing out that maybe violence isn't great. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's going to do it for us today. That's the 4 French poems and 3 Welsh romances, and that's the beginning of the pre-Galfridian period, the post-Galfridian period. Next time, as we said, we'll come back, we'll do the Vulgate and post-Vulgate cycles, and then wrap it up with the Mort d'Arthur. And that'll be fun, and that'll wrap up our Arthuriana series. But that's coming up next time. Eleanor, what do you have going on?
That's a great fucking question, homie. Other than thinking about Arthuriana all the time. I had a blog of mine got picked up by Slate, where I was talking trash about those t-shirts that say "We are the daughters of the witches you couldn't burn." So go give that a click because it'll make Slate think it's worth hiring me, so that's good. Otherwise, I'm on the socials at Going Medieval. The blog is going-medieval.com. The Once and Future Sex is available for sale. But another thing is that the paperback, which is much less expensive, is now available for pre-order. Nice. It will be out in January. So if the thing that was holding you back from getting the book was that hardbacks are expensive, because they are, get yourself a cheaper one.
Nice.
Do it.
Nice, yeah. And you guys know where you can find me. Luke is Amazing on the socials, and my old show, People's History of the Old Republic, is available wherever you're listening to this. But yeah, that'll do it for us for today, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.